Good evening, everyone. Tonight is a meeting of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. The time is 6:30 p.m. Our first item is roll call. Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Liz Carp is absent. Joe Murphy.
Here.
Robin Pothier.
Here.
Caper Wilson.
Here.
Armand Monaco.
Here.
And Maria Mack is here. Our next agenda item is approval of minutes. This consists of minutes from the January 13, 2026 Planning Board Work Session, January 27th, 2026 Regular Session, February 10th, 2026 Work Session. I have a couple of comments on these. We've had conversations in the past about the minutes and about how thorough they should be versus how concise they should be, and I know that we tried to take a medium approach so that we had enough to make sense of things, although I personally still feel as though the motions, any motions for approval or denial, what have you, should be part of the minutes. But I know that to a certain extent we are using AI, which sometimes is somewhat obvious. There's some typos in January 13th and in January 27th. There are very limited areas. For example, on pages are not numbered, page 3, it says, Ms. Mack read her comments and concerns in relation to the project. I think there needs to be more than this. While I didn't submit a written paper on my concerns, I think they should be made clear. So it would be my recommendation that these, particularly the 27th, should be pulled, and whoever's doing the minutes needs to look at them again and make sure that they are accurate and more thorough. Those planning board members that went to the training last fall with Judge Lamphere, where he told us that the minutes are important because they are basically the record of what has occurred during the meeting, and nobody's going to go back and watch a video. So with the board's pleasure, could we just ask that the minutes have another look at by whomever's doing the minutes, and we'll see them at our next regular meeting. Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Great. All right, let's move on to our next agenda item.
Okay, we need to approve these and stuff, right?
No, we're not approving them.
Any of them?
We're pulling them. We're just
All
going to.
three?
Yes.
Oh.
Just for clarity, Madam Chair, your intent is to table?
Yes, table them, yes.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is a public hearing, change to a previously approved plan, major multi-household land development project, 571 Main Street. Jamie has provided us just now with a memo with regard to process. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Yes, excuse me. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Attorney Matthew Landry on behalf of the applicant. We came back in January, I believe, to renew our presentation on this application, and it got continued through February in order for the TRC to have an opportunity to review this. We did go in front of the TRC, I think, on February 11th, just prior to the snowstorm, so we missed you in February. The TRC narrowed down, I think, 3 particular issues that they wanted us to address on the application. One related to a turnaround on Perry Avenue. Because of the Perry Avenue extension, it sort of ends at a dead end. We are not extending Perry Ave quite as far now with this reiteration of it from the original design that you saw. It terminates right about where the existing access driveway is in the rear of the property. There was some commentary about whether or not we could utilize that existing opening where the new access drive to the rear of the property will come in. Somebody could do a 3-point turn there. We could widen it, reinforce the edges if necessary. or create a hammerhead or turnaround at the end of Perry Avenue. We're in agreement with that. I'm sure the fire marshal has some comments regarding that, but we would be amenable to a condition. We could certainly utilize the existing space for a turnaround. It's not a heavily trafficked road. We don't anticipate it would increase much even with this development, but I think in collaboration with the town on whether a turnaround at the very end would be appropriate versus utilizing the existing space, I'm sure we can work something out there that works for all interested parties, particularly since Perry Ave is not being extended quite as far. The second point that we picked up was whether or not the access off of Main Street would be utilized. That's the existing gated entrance to the property. That's going to be pedestrian and or emergency access only. Certainly can make that clearer on the plans or a condition of approval. We have no issues with that. Primary access is going to be off Perry to the rear and off Belmont. So that will help maintain the aesthetic with the gate, from Main Street, but that will only be used for emergency purposes. I think the final comment we picked up was reviewing the width of the streets throughout the property. There was a question of whether or not they needed to be made wide enough for two-way traffic. I think the minimum is at least 20 feet for fire apparatus. There were a few comments as to narrowing those roads to 20 feet and using reinforced pavement in case cars do need to get by and there needs to be room to travel off the side of the road as necessary. As long as the fire marshal would permit it, 20 feet is acceptable to us. We can certainly look at that and review that if the planning board prefers that. We don't think it's an issue. It was designed this way to provide, a wider travel path, but I think 20 feet is the minimum, and that would be acceptable to us as long as it's acceptable to the fire marshal. And then the general consensus, obviously, is with the improvements in Perry Avenue. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of collaborative efforts here with DPW, the engineer, and staff to go through that design and talk about utilities. We're obviously at the master plan stage, and we know that will all have to be addressed, but I think the consensus was that those details will come at the preliminary plan stage. And there were a few additional letters that were submitted in the record regarding stormwater runoff and the historic drainage problems on this property and the water that flows through the neighbor's property onto my client's property onto Main Street. That's very well documented. It was the reason why there was a lawsuit between my client and the town, and also a reason why there was a settlement agreement where we agreed to work in a collaborative way with the town to resolve those issues. Certainly nothing that we're doing will exacerbate that. DEM is going to have a say in those runoff calculations and how that's going to work. We've had some preliminary calculations done regarding the wetlands in the rear of the property. All of this will work on this conceptual basis, and obviously all of those details will be further reviewed at the next stage, both on a local and state level. So we are aware and very sensitive of the runoff issues and the water issues, and we're working very diligently to help resolve those issues as we move through this process. So that's all I have. I have our project team here, but those were the three items I took out of the TRC. If there's any others, I'd be happy to address those, but we're amenable to all of those points that were discussed by way of conditions of approval or notes on the plan. However, the third one, just the narrowing of the streets, would just obviously be subject to fire marshal signing off on that as being acceptable. But
Thank you. Jamie, Brian, and Mark, any comments from staff at this point in time?
Madam Chair, our primary concerns are associated with the final engineering, which is due at preliminary stage, with the understanding that you're at master plan. The applicant is required to do a certain level of design at this phase. There's a higher degree at the next phase. I'm sure legal counsel can weigh in on that a little bit more than I can as the planning director. Understanding the issue and where we are at master plan, we do have a staff project memo that's included in our electronic filings. We also have a draft motion with the understanding that the planning board is being introduced with this language this evening, and that in all likelihood you would not act on that motion. It is a draft. You would review that draft, and potentially, if you saw fit, you could add that to your work session in 2 weeks, or continue it to your regular session 4 weeks from now. But again, it's intended to solidify the discussion that has occurred to date, realizing the public hearing is still open, but it contained 11 items specific to conditions. Again, I'll just go through those items briefly in summary.
And Jamie, we haven't had a chance to actually read this yet.
Yeah, I'm just going to run
so-
through it real
okay.
quick. Item number 1 is associated with the number of units, as well as the original setbacks mandated by the settlement agreement. Item number 2 is emergency layout and hydrant locations. Item number 3 is solidifying egress and ingress associated with those emergency apparatus. Item number 4 is circulation, snow storage, and parking. Item number 5 is accommodating trash removal and screening from abutting properties. Item number 6 is a full drainage evaluation and consideration of above ground and underground stormwater management, as well as retaining the 100-year storm event and looking at existing drainage patterns. Item number 7 was a flow analysis for fire suppression associated with all of the residential components. Item number 8 was phasing and sequencing, not limited to road construction, driveway construction, landscaping, stormwater, and erosion sedimentation control. Item number 9 was a discussion Mr. Landry touched upon a little bit regarding access to Main Street, whether it's vehicular or pedestrian, and the fact they're proposing right now to have a crosswalk that intersects with a driveway, whether it's emergency or not. Perhaps not the best location for a crosswalk when you also have potential vehicular conflicts. Item number 10 was a detailed analysis of any proposed improvements to Perry Ave. Item number 11 is more of a long-term item in any favorable manner as this moves through the process, is solidifying the documentation necessary for the maintenance of any stormwater improvements or improvements to the property in perpetuity. So, again, that's flying at a high level, realizing the planning board members will need to digest this and revisit it in 2 to 4 weeks.
Thanks, Jamie. Brian, do you have anything other than what Jamie went over?
No, we went through this together
Okay.
during the day.
And Mark, have you had the opportunity to see this? And
Yes, I've seen it, but I agree with what's been said.
right. And because this is a public hearing and there may be some folks who have not attended hearings on this particular project, Mr. Landry did make reference to the process up to this point. But I'm wondering if, Peter, you would just like to summarize where we are, how we got here, and then what the difference is between master plan and preliminary for folks that may not be up to speed with that.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a very project that's been around for a long time. It originally appeared back before this board, I should have this in front of me, but 2014. And it was originally denied at the master plan stage. So although the board is aware, for the members of the public who may not be, there's 3 stages of review in every planning board application for a major land development project like this one. The first stage is called the master plan stage, and that's where you get a look at the big picture outline of the project, what's being proposed, where the units are going to be located generally. But this is an opportunity for the developer to propose it without having to spend the money on getting the hard engineering done, which can be time-consuming and expensive. So they were denied at the master plan stage. They appealed that to the Superior Court, and ultimately there was that appeal along with a separate lawsuit that was mentioned by Mr. Landry, was settled by the town. As part of that settlement agreement, it was agreed that the appeal would overturn the decision of the board, and the master plan was approved. And from that point, it would be treated as an ordinary master plan. I believe that when the approval went into place, it might have still been when there was the tolling period that had applied for a long period of time, I think up until 2017, to stop any expiration period of master plans. And that was due to the market downturn of 2008 and after that. But in any event, the current master plan application, they had their 2-year vesting period after the tolling period end. They had the right by right to request 2 more 1-year extensions for a total of 4 years. And then they asked for 1 more extension. And during that period, they've asked to amend the plan to provide what's before you now. So if it wasn't approved, they could go back to the prior project that's already been approved. This is just asking to revise the master plan, subject to the revisions that's been submitted in this application. The next step in the process, if this was approved, and even if it wasn't approved, if it was approved, they'd go with the revised plan. They'd have to get the hard engineering for the preliminary plan stage of review, which is the next stage. If this wasn't approved, they could still move to the preliminary plan stage of review. They just have to do it with their original master plan. So,
Thank you, Peter.
thank you.
Are there any comments or questions from board members at this time?
I have one.
Go ahead, Susan.
Not to put you on the spot again, but could you explain to me about, there's no affordable housing being offered in this project, and how that, what was the law around whether or not there was affordable housing?
So this is a fee in lieu project where the zoning ordinance allowed, as a part of your inclusionary zoning requirements, to either put the deed restricted affordable units on site, or to pay a fee that's set by Rhode Island Housing per unit for the number of units that they would otherwise be required to build. They'd give that to the town. It would be put in a deed restricted fund to develop off-site affordable housing.
If there are no further comments or questions, this is a public hearing. If you'd like to speak, come up to the mic and state your name for the record. And Brian, can we get a map of the site plan on screen?
Brant White, 53 Perry Avenue. I guess at the technical planning review meeting, we discussed a turnaround on the end of Perry Avenue. I'm not quite sure how that can be addressed. The wetlands were identified on the property, but there's still directly across from my driveway, which, the turnaround would take up part of my driveway. But I'm not sure how we could put that in a wetland area. I know DEM's not gonna go outside the property markers, but there is a large area there. So I don't know how that turnaround would happen there. We discussed a couple meetings ago, or the engineers discussed the improvements to Perry Avenue. I think from my property, it would be pavement only. That's the only improvement. There'd be a lift system that I already own on my property, so the sewer would never benefit my property. The water, unless we're reconfiguring it, the foundations of these properties, that's every property. Every property, except for mine, has their own septic or whatever we call the sewer system, their private sewer systems. In addition, every property, the water is access to Highland Avenue. So the water is not going to be a benefit to any of those properties unless you're digging out a foundation and changing it. The sewers aren't, because my property it won't, because I have a lift system to the backyard. And then everybody else has private sewer. And at least 2 out of those 3 properties have put in new sewer systems because they've sold. So the concerns about the whatever turnaround, I'm not sure how that would ever work. You know, the extension of Perry Avenue, which they're not discussing anymore, the extension would go into that water flow, so they had to, reconfigure that. So the water flow, once again, is historic. I've had the Department of Public Works out on my property to say it's historical water flow out of a pipe that the town has onto my property and onto Mr. Fiore's property, onto Mrs. Osborne's property, and then back onto Main Street. So that historical water flow comes from a pipe on Highland Avenue. So there's a catch basin on Kenwood, at the end of Kenwood on Highland, that causes all these problems. In addition, and I made multiple copies, because this historic water flow, it's not a 100-year storm, I remind everybody, because 2 days ago, Mr. Fiore's property was filled with water again. I have pictures. I think I have 6 for people to look at. We're not talking about development of that area, but that historical water flow goes through that property from a pipe from the town. So we continue to discuss that, but that's the problem with a turnaround on that road. The water is there, right there. So I don't know how that would work. But I don't know if I have multiple copies. I have one for the town again.
We can share.
This continues to be an issue that the town gives everybody, and I know we've had, the applicant has had lawsuits about this, but it's continued. I don't know how a turnaround can be plopped in the mud. So I'm not quite sure what was agreed upon about this turnaround on the end of the road. So I'd like more clarification on that, please.
Thank you.
Could someone help locate the photograph on the map?
I think the gentleman who submitted it can.
If you only had a laser pointer, right?
Laser pointer wouldn't work on the TV screens, unfortunately.
Right.
Madam Chair, there'll be no record of this.
Yeah, can you just point and then go back to the mic and explain?
So, Madam Chair, what the gentleman referred to is at the
Northwest?
western terminus of Perry Ave, looking south onto the Fiore property.
So if you notice on the picture, there's two orange flags that say wetlands, they're still there. That is identified on that picture because there's two of those flags. So it comes off the left portion of the wetlands and it goes to the pond. So one second. Unit 1 and 2 would not be on that picture. So he has moved that, previously those foundations would have stopped that water flow, but those ponding is the continuation of that pond or wetlands on the end of Perry to the pond. That's how historically it goes through the property. Now, the wetland on the northern center of the map is the end of Perry Avenue. So we're talking, see how that goes into the road? That's what we're talking about. Forgive me for the term, like a hammerhead turnaround. That's where we're talking that has to go. So that's not going to go there. I mean, sure, it's going to take away some of the driveway on my property, which is understandable because of the 50-foot right-of-way, but I don't know, like the identified wetland that DEM went in and identified for the project would be compromised then. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Landry, do you have your engineering folks here this evening?
Molly Titus from Dupree.
So perhaps you could, even though we are only at the master plan stage of review, explain how it might be possible to navigate Mr. White's concerns through good design as you move forward, and perhaps explain the number of options that might be available.
In terms of the turnaround or just stormwater management in general?
Probably both of them. I mean, he made reference to the stormwater is coming from the town's pipe, but I believe there's also surface stormwater flow that we have on site.
So the proposed project will use pervious pavement and underground storage for roof water. The historic stormwater flow from the town's pipe and also the stormwater from Perry Avenue, which has no drainage in it as well. A new drainage system will be created behind units 1 and 2, outside the buffers of the two wetlands. We've already approached DEM. They're aware of the settlement agreement. We've had these flags verified, and they're willing to work with us on how we can modify this area to improve the drainage condition that was not created by this applicant. So it will serve to attenuate water on the site that's coming from off-site and slow its flow across the site, ultimately into the neighbor's yard and out to Main Street. And that'll probably be a combination of detention, a piping network. We're going to have to look at a few options and how much DEM will let us modify what's existing. And then for the turnaround, the end of Perry Avenue does just truncate in the neighbor's yard. And as part of the TRC, they had looked at potentially Hammerhead. It was also discussed that we would utilize this project's driveway as the turnaround and allow that available space so that someone could do like a 3-point turn at the end of Perry Avenue, utilizing this driveway to not create additional impervious within the right-of-way or, you know, within a neighbor's yard to allow this turnaround.
And can you tell us a little bit about when underground storage systems are used and how effective they are and how well they, how long they last, how, you know, what's their...
Yeah, so like I said, we're proposing underground storage for the roof water, which is always our best option. It doesn't require as much pretreatment. You have clean water being directly infiltrated into the groundwater, providing recharge, and there's not a lot of clogging. You know, you're not having pavement that's got sand on it and salt being directly directed into the groundwater. So we always propose to infiltrate clean roof water first. And then the pervious section of pavement, that has multiple layers of filters. So there's sand filters beneath it, there's a gravel course. And these measures have been proven extremely effective and, you know, more friendly. It keeps, you know, the LID, the limited impact of the recharge is happening where the impervious is. We're not piping it, you know, 500 feet across a site and then just creating more areas to store water. So it really, the goal of stormwater is to put it back in the ground, right where the impervious is happening.
And what is generally sort of the effectiveness and the maintenance related to not just the pervious pavement, but the underground tanks?
They have monitoring points. They'll have a lid on it that you can open and look. And if these systems are, for this type of project, would be sized for a 100-year storm. So, I mean, you would be looking at 8.5 inches of water minimum that would need to be held and captured and then recharged before you'd see an outlet from that system. And there's an operation and maintenance plan in place that, you know, should you see 2 inches of rain and the system is overflowing, you know you have a problem, which would be very apparent on this site because there'd be water.
While we're at it, any engineering questions at this point for board members? Susan?
Hi.
Hi.
Did you see the photographs that we were sent?
I did, yeah. So those are at the front of the property.
Mm-hmm.
So the water, as was mentioned, goes into the middle wetland, flows across the back of units 1 and 2 into the pond. There's a pipe out of the pond, and then there's a swale and an ASSF, which is an area subject to storm flowage, through the neighboring property's yard, which then comes back through and dumps into the front yard of this property, and then pours out onto Main Street.
So the photograph of the pipe was coming out of that wetland and into the neighbor's?
It goes into the neighbor's yard and then comes back out into the bottom right corner on the screen. Those photos of the trees are at that location, and then the other location through the gate is at the front of the property on
Okay.
Main Street.
Do you feel like there's any remedy to that flow situation with a heavy rainfall? Like, I'm not sure of the rainfall that precipitated those photographs.
So the work that we're going to do behind units 1 and 2 will be for that method only. We're going to do a separate system to address the project, but we're going to do, as part of the settlement agreement, is to solve that stormwater problem that was created. That was part of the lawsuit. So that problem that was created by the pipe from Highland Avenue is not the applicant's, but the agreement was, we will fix the problem created while doing this project for the applicant.
Okay, so that problem being that outfall of that pipe that's going into the neighboring property and then coming back in.
The rate of water leaving this site that's coming from Highland Avenue and from Perry Avenue.
Okay, so this project will address any additional stormwater created by the project,
Separately.
but also go back and repair some of the pre-existing problems.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can we take that to mean that because of the complicated nature of this site, that your engineering will, in essence, go above and beyond the DEM requirement of no net increase in runoff?
Oh, absolutely. It's part of the court order. It's part of our approval that's in place for this master plan today.
Yes, the images that we were sent toward the southern portion of the property showed not only considerable flow through that, the gate area, but also adjacent to the stone wall, which you would
Yes.
think would eventually undermine that stone wall.
Yep, so that was part of our initial meeting with the EM, how we work through what's happening today. You know, a separate system for ours, which they can review easily, but how they're going to work with us to do as much as possible to alleviate that flow.
And some of the stormwater that ultimately flows through the property is sheet flow that's not limited to discharge from the pipe, correct?
There's the existing home. I mean, there's obviously runoff generated from the existing roof and patio on the property,
Right,
but
right.
I don't think that is the cause. Obviously, that's down gradient of all the water that's pouring through from those wetlands.
Right. Any other engineering questions at this point?
Sorry, one more.
Oh, Susan?
So that additional, sorry.
It's
So that
okay.
additional engineering that will help remediate the existing problems, is that something that we're seeing on our plans now, or is that something we'll see at preliminary?
It'll be a preliminary. You know, we've just looked at water tables up in the rear and where we can store water, and DEM required that we get that wetlands edge verification, which was unfortunately very delayed by their part, but now they will meet with us as we go through design so we can talk about the best remedies.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak? Come up to the... And just state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Stephanie Osborne, 607 Main Street. As we've all spoken here for many years, that water is a huge problem back there. We've heard an explanation of what might happen to the water coming off of Highland down through Brent Wright's property. Since that is a lot of wetlands in the back far left-hand corner, as I heard Molly speaking, detention. Now, is that detention pond to go more water into the pond, or is that actually tanks underground? So if they can resolve the water coming off of Highland Avenue, I still have major concerns that a lot of that back property is still wetlands. And you start putting in all the blacktop roads and start putting in the foundations, where is all that water from those buildings that blacktop road's going to run into? Eventually, I can't see how it would not run into that pond and put an intense flow down through my property, underneath the Fusco's property, and over to Roland's property. So how can they guarantee that when they go in there and they put foundations and they start moving around that grade of land, that the flow is not going to go back into that pond and be greater than it is now? Because when we get a rain, and sometimes we've been getting very heavy rains with the change in the weather, that water really flows through that under the piping of Mr. Fusco's and down in front of Roland's property. It's like a skating pond. So that water is moving very fast and rapidly. So I would like to know what kind of guarantee there would be that those particular buildings on the far west side of that development proposed, where is that water going? And is what kind of guarantee when I hear it will go back under the ground 8 inches? Well, that water is all going to find its way back in that pond and run downstream into our properties again. Unless somebody could explain that to me, how it would not.
Thank you. I believe, Ms. Titus, has in mind a multifaceted approach that includes both underground storage as well as detention ponds, but we can certainly get some clarification, again, even though being at master plan, they are working on how to figure this out in conjunction with DEM, and obviously DPS will be part of the conversation. As far as guarantee, I'm not sure how that specific language works, but again, so Molly, could you just clarify what Ms. Osborne asked? And I'm not sure if the guarantee part is a legal question or if it's an engineering question.
What I will say is we are going to look at underground and above-ground storage
Yep.
based on water table between those two wetlands, and we're going to maximize the amount of storage we can get, because the more that we store, the less water that will flow through. You know, in a 100-year storm, will we capture it all? I can say with certainty, no. There's a neighborhood above us that's pouring onto here. So I think you would see the vast improvements in small storms. You know, the nuisance storms like they're saying on, Monday, when there's a couple inches of rain, the ground is firm and wet, then that flow would be attenuated. But I guarantee, as engineers, we certainly do our best always, and there's a lot of reviews in place, and there's checkers checking. But legally, yeah, I can't say a guarantee. But we design all these sites, and I think as Deprete Engineering, we have a pretty good track record in this town of providing projects that work well and sustain themselves. So.
And I'm sure you've heard the question come up quite often, what if we have a situation similar to the 2010 storms where we had two 50-year storms back to back? And that seemed to have much more of an impact all over the state, in fact, than a typical 100-year storm.
I do. All I can offer is that we certainly do our best. Sometimes we do go above and beyond if we can store, like I said, we're going to store as much water as we have room to store legally. And that will be based on wetland setbacks and water tables.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, can I ask another question?
Yes.
Do I remember that these structures will be on slabs as opposed to dug foundations? And then also, is the pavement permeable?
Pavement permeable,
Yes.
permeable, yes.
Okay.
We don't have basements, right? But not a basement. We haven't gotten there yet.
You have to come up to the mic so that it's all on the record, please.
Good evening. Chris Mazur, principal at 401 Architecture in East Greenwich. We haven't gotten there yet, but any foundation system will be tied into the engineering that Molly is doing. And I wanted to make a point. It's essentially two issues here. One, we're designing the site for the new buildings, for the new construction separately than the Highland pipe issue of that flow. So the new system, based on our new construction, will be highly engineered. It'll be to current codes and standards of what we can do, but any drainage, it will be perimeter drained, whether it's a foundation. And interestingly enough, they've now increased the frost depth for foundations to 48 inches, which was 40 in the state. So regardless of that, it will be piped, it will be contained in her detention area, or however they feel to handle it.
Thank you. Mr. Landry, did you want to say something? It looked like you were getting up earlier.
Well, two things. One, obviously, we're very concerned about the drainage and the runoff issues that everybody's concerned about. My client and the town made it pretty clear that there would be a collaborative effort to resolve this issue. It's in his interest as well as everybody else's. So I think the point has been made that there are two points of focus, the development and the runoff. By law, we're not allowed to increase any stormwater runoff onto neighboring sites. That's reviewed locally, and that's reviewed by the state. So there'll be a pretty significant permitting process that this goes through and gets reviewed. And then, you know, the other Highland Ave, the other runoff issues that have been historic here, those are going to be intricately designed, and the systems will be prepared, and those will be subject to a number of public hearings and staff reviews locally, as well as the state. So we'll be very transparent about what that infiltration design will look like, where it'll be, how it's going to work, what the stormwater calculations are. DePreet's reputation stands before them, so I'm very confident that they will resolve most of these issues. To guarantee it is very difficult, obviously, but all of those details will certainly come as we move through the process. The only other unrelated comment I was going to make was with the crosswalk, just while it's fresh in my mind. That was a carryover from the original approval. That was actually something that somebody had asked for at some point. Molly went back through her notes. We're perfectly fine eliminating it. That was just a carryover from an original plan. So just to throw that out there, if that's something I can easily dispose of, then put it on the record.
Thank you. Mr. White?
So the neighbors of the property, you know, we're talking about slowing down the water flow. It can't be slowed down for my property, or it will be devastating to that property in the home. So as we say, like the lower properties, sure, we want the water moving through, but they want to slow it down. But if it slows down, that's going to back up that. Like, it's not just a 100-year storm. It's when they clean out the fire hydrants. So understand that it's not just this 100-year storm or rain that comes every once in a while. In the summer, it's the clean out of the hydrant. So I can't have that water slow down, because then I have more than just a pool at my house then, you know. So, like, we can't slow it down there. They want to slow it down to go out onto Main Street, but that can't be slowed down there. So, like, I'm at odds with that. And the turnaround, you know, if it's, I don't know how that happens closer to the Elks property, but I guess we can see that in engineering later.
Assuming you've shared this perspective with DPS,
Which?
your perspective about the impact that slowing the water down adjacent to your property will have?
I have, but understand that you are the only one that is here from the beginning of this project with, you know, and Stephanie, and no, no, he wasn't.
Toward the end, maybe. Not even toward the end. Okay.
Right, so you're the only one. It's not, no, there was a different attorney for the town, everything. So, like, you're the only one that is here. So, like, if people haven't gone down Perry, you should see how close my neighbor's house is. I'm not saying my house has appropriate setback for that 50-foot wide, you know, road, but my neighbor's does not, and other properties do not. There's not going to be room for a sidewalk there. I walk my dog on that road 3 times a day. You know, if the Elks is having a function, I'm jumping on the grass. So, just things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I'm a newbie. Thank you. My name is Dr. Colin Woodard. I'm the owner of 576 Main Street, which sits directly across from the proposed development on 571 Main Street. Those of you that don't know me, I apologize if I don't recognize some of you, but I'm a practicing gastroenterologist serving the community here at South County. We moved to Wakefield with my wife and 2 children in June of 2020. I'd like to add that I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician as well as gastroenterologist, entering my 13th year as a physician. I'd like to just share a few of my concerns with the property. One of these has been, I think, addressed ad nauseum this evening, so I won't go too far into it, but obviously the water mitigation, the runoff, needs to be addressed to everybody's satisfaction a bit more. Obviously, we're seeing more 100-year storms. These will be every few year storms rather than every 100 years moving in the future. 20 to 30 years. When I anticipate being in my house into the future, I do worry that if we don't plan for excellent water mitigation now, that is going to be a significant concern down the road, and I would not want to see harm to my property nor my neighbors. My other more significant concern really has to do with the health and well-being of my children. I have kind of been in and out of these meetings. I'm pretty busy, so unfortunately I don't get to go to all of them. But it's my memory that one of these meetings, Mr. Fiore stated the construction project would be drawn out over several years. And I presume that that's as to not disrupt the community. There are several reputable studies in medical journals which do cite the detrimental effects to children raised near large construction projects. These studies do cite potential adverse effects to individuals, including chronic lung inflammation, which can lead down the road to lung cancer, and neurocognitive defects from noise pollution, which can affect brain development. I do worry not only for my children who are age 6 and 9, but also my neighbors' children who are even younger. I could also worry about potential future families that may move into the area. As a physician, I can tell you through my personal experience, the rates of digestive cancers are increasing at alarming rates. This has also mirrored an alarming rise in lung cancer in non-smokers under the age of 50, which we do anticipate will increase over the next several years. I am fearful for direct exposure to the air pollution from the construction site will impact my children's future health, and potentially noise pollution could affect development. And I do feel it's important to go on record with these concerns so that there may be future accountability should some detrimental health defects arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Hi, I'm Ben DeFusco. I live on 593 Main Street, and I think anything that I wanted to say at this point it's always said by Stephanie. She talks way better than I do. I didn't even know I had a pipe going through my yard, so that's news to me. That's good to know. But you know, I can't possibly fathom how building something is going to help with the water runoff, and the fact that even in the summertime, my sump pump is going consistently. You know, we had a water ban and I would still have my sump pump go off. I have drainage in my backyard that always has 4 to 5 inches of water in it. I mean, there's a stream that comes down. This isn't a 100-year storm. This is every spring. We have videos from 23, 24, 25, 26 of the same issues. And I just, you know, this is my forever house when I move back home to my hometown. And like, I just don't want to see it get destroyed or, you know. So just wanted to voice my concerns.
Thank you. Is there anything that,
Sorry.
that's all right. Please
So-
continue.
We're here this evening, so you can see how concerned the neighbors are of the water. And to do my best, I think is unacceptable. What is the best? It's infamous. We don't have any idea what the best is. So to even have any excess water run from this project to any of our properties is really unacceptable. So I know tonight this doesn't get resolved. It has to go to the next preliminary plan. And when that is submitted at that point in time, is that when they present what they're going to do and when it's voted on at that time?
Yes, all of the engineering, stormwater calculations, and so on will occur at the preliminary stage of review.
Okay.
Because the third stage of review, final, is just administrative in nature, so preliminary is really where we get the most information.
Yeah, I've been in that house almost 29, 30 years now. And with these storms, it has gotten a lot worse. And I cannot imagine that you have wetlands behind me, that disturbing that property's wetlands on the edge of it and soil that my property stream is not going to stop overflowing and going on other parts of the properties because right now it is in the trough. But if we get any more water in there, it's going to really come out. And there's been a few times that we've had such bad rainstorms there that we've even had to call the fire department. Mr. DeFusco wasn't living there because we were afraid and scared to death at the people's house next to me that the water was going to start going into the house. And that was a really bad storm. So this isn't an issue just over a little rainstorm. This is an issue over time and where the weather is increasingly becoming heavier rains, more wet. It is becoming a problem. And there's got to be some kind of a guarantee that we are not going to get more water on our properties, or else we're in trouble.
Just a quick question for you. So as Mr. Fusco said, rather than just alluding to storms as you have, it appears that it's an issue of an existing condition.
In the springtime, when we get rains, yes, heavy rains, it's a real problem. If it's a hot summer day, no, it's not an issue. In the fall, it's really not an issue, but when we get the heavy spring rains or the summer rains or storms, and they don't have to be a northeaster anymore. It's just the content of how fast the rains are coming down.
Thank you.
And also, there is a stone wall behind there. I think it's a slate stone wall. And if that stone wall of that slate, and it's probably 10 feet high, 12 feet high, that keeps the property back on the Fiore property. And if we get more water through that wall and that slate wall, that wall could come down.
Right, yeah. Thank you. Question for Mark, maybe, and Jamie. Is there anything in our construction process that relates to air quality or control of dust and so on? Based on what one of the speakers asked this evening.
Yeah, during normal construction aspects, site clearing, stripping, there are erosion sedimentation control plans, there are dust controls, there are items associated with that. DEM has air quality standards for any demolition or construction, but again, that's done at the state level. The town doesn't have the ability to test air quality, but again, that's done through the building code and done through state regulations.
And is this anything that the applicant would care, with being very experienced in terms of construction process, would like to comment on?
Sure. Chris Major again, 41 Architecture. I wanted to also respond to this issue of guaranteed. I don't think Molly was addressing or saying guaranteed, nothing's guaranteed in life, and with climate change, we don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, the amount of rain we're going to get. I think what she was saying, and with any construction project, that site will be designed and it will be better than what is the water flow now. Can we guarantee that, Hurricane Roland rolls through the area or something? That's the first name I can think of, but no, we can't, because, again, nothing's guaranteed. In terms of construction process, the site is to be wet, it's to be hosed during any demolition, during any moving and grading of earth. There's erosion control that's in place, that is by code, and all those things are to mitigate between any exposure or loose air, loose dust. And again, this construction is not industrial type construction. It's going to be concrete, and it's going to be wood, and it's going to be siding, and that's roughly about it. It's residential construction, nothing toxic beyond that, so just to add a couple things.
Thank you. And Jamie or Mark, would the soil erosion and sedimentation control plan, that will be a document that is available to the public?
So on the permitting side, there, in essence, there's two steps. There's a requirement in our regulations for the applicant to submit a soil and erosion control plan for the project as they go through preliminary plan approval as well as final plan approval. And then the second step to that process is any site disturbance associated with the actual construction of the project requires additional permitting through the Department of Public Service, where, you know, if they applied today, both Mark Convoy, Rich Bourbonnais, and their team would be evaluating that application and comparing it to our standards as well as what was prepared through the application process. So again, there are two permit steps that have to occur before building permits are issued. You cannot get a building permit unless you have that erosion sedimentation control plan, which they refer to as a CERC plan, from the town, and that's processed through DPS.
And there are site inspections that occur during the process, correct?
Yes.
And is that something that the public can be made aware of in terms of our regulations there?
I mean, site inspections are covered by DPS. Documents are public. So if council wants to weigh in on any additional.
Very good, thank you.
There isn't a process laid out to let the public know when inspections are occurring. They aren't, you know, there are property rights, so an applicant can't, we'll say, invite themselves to participate in a site walk for an inspection. Again, that would be at the discretion of the property owner, but again, that's something that DPS and the planning department has not undertaken in the past.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, please come up to the mic.
Right.
Just restate your name, please, even though we know who
Stephanie
you are.
Osborne, 607 Main Street. So, time frame of this building, this project going on. Does the town have any capabilities of putting any time limit? We're talking about 30-some units. We're not talking about 100, 400. And over a period of time, this does change life for people in our neighborhood. And it's mostly residential except for the Elks there. So to be listening to contractors, excavation, pounding, banging, I do run a bed and breakfast, and so I'm concerned what's going to happen, what's going to go on, and how many summers and springs we're going to hear all of this, and I don't know if Mr. Fiore has any indication of how long this is going to take, and if it's going to be an answer that he doesn't know. Is there a way that the town can put some kind of time frame on this to protect the neighbors from going on this for years and years? I mean, I've been coming here since 2014. If we continue this, probably I might die before the project's done. But if I'm living, I certainly don't want to listen to that for the rest of my life every Sunday, every summer or spring.
I will ask legal. I'm sure there's an ideal time frame, and then there may be a modification of that time frame depending on design and other occurrences during the process. But Peter?
Sure. So as far as the permitting time frame, we're all aware of that. That's separate than the building time frame. The time frame that's imposed by state law is that from the time you pull a building permit, there's a 6 months to complete it, or so long as they're diligently pursuing the building permit, they can extend beyond the 6 months, but it would be up to the building official to make sure that they're diligently completing the permit so that they're not leaving, a half-constructed building on site. With regard to, the phasing of the property, when the buildings are going to be built. You could impose conditions as to phasing, but that's nothing that would be imposed by state law. So the only limit imposed by state law is when they pull a permit for a particular unit, they'd have 6 months to get it completed, which can be extended so long as they can show the building official that they're diligently pursuing the permit.
And do we know if there's a plan to phase this?
So right now, it's proposed in 2 phases. I think the timeline was 10 years. Roland, do you want to address it?
Good evening, Roland Fiore, owner of the property. Now, the 10 years was strictly to keep the permit alive. This is a fairly small construction project. I see it in 2 phases. It speaks for itself, the one on the entrance on Belmont and Perry Avenue. And I think the project would move very quickly once it starts, depending on the market. But the market looks very good. There's a lot of interest on the project if I'm to go forward right away.
Is that 10 years for both phases? Is that how it works?
No, that 10 years was for the permit. It had nothing to do with construction.
Okay.
I was just, at that point when we came in a few years ago, I was looking for a longer term because it's my residence.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, I'm looking for no special consideration on anything. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
No questions from?
Thank you.
Thanks. The applicant has been generous in the time frame that they have given us. I believe, I can't put my hands on it, but I think it's the end of June. Is that correct? Does that sound right?
I think it's May 1st.
Oh, May 1st.
The reason being, we came for an extension of the master plan vesting. That expires May 26th, I believe, but at the last meeting, because there were so many continuances, I think we all had agreed on May 1st for a decision.
So Jamie has made a suggestion of, since we received this draft motion this evening, that the planning board have time to digest it, and we would put this on our work session agenda in 2 weeks. And if everybody is fine with that, then somebody could make a motion to close the public hearing, if so desired.
I'll make the motion to close the public hearing.
We have a motion from Joe. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Caper. Any further discussion?
If we have time to review this and questions come up and things that we need clarified, does closing the public hearing affect that ability to hear from them again?
Hearing from who again?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm talking about the engineers or...
So if you close the public hearing, the only thing you can't do is take new information. You can clarify what you have before you and put a finer point on things if you need clarification, but if there's going to be a change in the plan as a result of the discussion, then you'd need to allow the public to comment on it.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Susan was talking about conditions of approval that might be modified and might need input from the applicant.
If it's not going to change the overall plan, you're just talking about the conditions of approval, you could do that after the public hearing's closed.
Are you satisfied with that answer? So. Okay. So we have a motion from Joe, a second from Caper. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Motion carries. Thank you. That wraps up our agenda. The other items are report of administrative officer, which is explained in the in item G, unless anyone has any questions. We actually already have a duty member for the TRC meeting. Jamie, if you don't have anything else?
The only thing I want the planning board to be clear under the report of the administrative officer and planning director, we're undergoing discussions with 349 Main Street. That's the micro boutique hotel in the Sheldon Furniture Building. And we are discussing with them the addition to their construction documentation for HVAC units on the roof. We had those discussions with both their architectural team and a representative of the owner about the need as we move forward to potentially screen those units from public view. Again, if you're on the sidewalk looking up, you're not going to be able to see them, but if you're 75 to 100 yards away, we don't want them to detract from the historic nature of the building. I have received letters from Jeff Commands and correspondence from him that they are fully committed to adhering to the decision of the administrative officer if they feel, if he, she, or the person in that office feels the need to have those elements screened. They're doing everything within their power to limit the visual implications of those. I think the latest correspondence, and there's one representative here on the architectural team, that they're 3 feet in height, they're centered on the roof, and again, we're not concerned with immediate visual impact, but we do have properties on the southern side of this location that may have them visible. There's a great example in Greenwich of a renovation of a building on Main Street where they did a fairly good job on the architectural elements of the building and then stuck 20 plus HVAC units on the roof, which are all very visible from about 100 yards away and even 50 yards away. I would not have entertained dealing with this as the administrative officer without the commitment of the applicant to address those. Again, there is a representative here, so I don't know if I don't want to misspeak on their behalf, but again, there appears to be a significant commitment that if it is visually obtrusive in the eyes of the administrative officer, that they will screen them. And then when they screen them, they're going to also have to get that screening through the state because they are applying for historic tax
Historic
credits.
tax credits, right. Yeah. It's good. Okay. If you want to speak, come right up to the mic. Sure. And just state your name for the record, please.
Matthew McGeorge, architect of record. Everything Jamie said was accurate, and the most recent letter came from March 18th that speaks directly to the State Historic Preservation Office and the tax credits and how there is a commitment to ensure that happens. The point being, we can't design the final solution until we know what the problem is, right? So we're going to have to comply to the state. We're willing to comply with whatever conditional requirements you might impose. The issue is the owner is committing to solve a potential problem that we don't know exactly what the solution looks like yet. We did some research on historical precedent for mansard, filigreed iron, wood screening details. So we want to make sure it's the appropriate solution for a problem we don't know we even have yet. But the fact is we're committed to doing that, which will be required at the state level first and foremost, which my understanding from the applicant is that takes precedent over the municipality. So they're going to make us do something if there's something that needs to be done, and then we'll just work with you in the town to make sure everybody's happy with it. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. And to speak to that project in East Greenwich, I was actually involved in that project, and much to our chagrin, the ownership and construction management side decided to take the route they did on that. So we don't want our reputation to be sullied by something like that happening here.
And that's why I stated originally, there was a significant effort in the restoration and repair of that building on the architectural side. It was somewhat of a shame that those rooftop systems were added to that building, because they did a really nice job renovating.
Thank you. Any questions?
It sounds good. It's nice to see historic tax credits being used. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion from Joe, second.
I'll second.
Second from Susan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.